Why are so many dogs suffering from health issues? Actress Katherine Heigl, who's helped save over 16,000 dogs through her foundation, says she's seeing more issues with dogs' joints, odors, and health than ever before. And after doing a ton of research, she feels there's one place we can look to support any dog's health: their food. So she decided to create something she could actually feel good about feeding her dogs. It's called Superfood Complete. Superfood Complete is made with over 30 of the healthiest ingredients on the planet, including several superfoods vital to your dog's health. Badlands Ranch also sponsors the Jason Debus Heigl Foundation, which has helped rescue thousands of dogs and place them in loving homes. Dogs across America are trying this food and experiencing amazing health benefits. Go to badlandsranch.com/save50 and order right now to get up to 50% off your regular price order with a 90-day money-back guarantee. If you want your dog to experience all these incredible things, go to badlandsranch.com/save50 today.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by Lucky Bastard Distillers, Saskatchewan's premier distillery, and by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, brewed in the heart of Regina. Welcome to the Three Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only John's a Sicko podcast. I'm Joel Gasson with John Fraser as usual. Plenty to get to this week as it's here. It's June.
Let's go.
The CFL regular season is about to begin. By the time you are listening to this, probably game day between the Bombers and the Alouettes, as the CFL was smart this year and made the Grey Cup rematch the season opening game.
What a novel concept.
Yep, so that'll go down Thursday night at now Princess Auto Stadium. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to. Not because Princess Auto is a very well-known brand in our lives, because they sponsor just about everything in curling.
That's fair, and including Colin Hodgson's teams for basically his entire career.
Yeah, so it's a brand I'm well known, I'm well versed with. I know a lot of it. It's not a weird name to say for me. It's just that doesn't really roll off the tongue as a stadium name quite yet. I don't know.
Well, and it's gone, and it's just I feel like Winnipeg has fallen into that trap of changing the name too many times. It's gone from Investors Group Field to IG Field to Princess Auto Stadium.
Yeah, I imagine that the first switch was probably more IG's fault than their own.
That's fair. Yeah. It's funny though. I'm also very well versed with Princess Auto. It is my dad's favorite place to go, to the point that if him and my mom are visiting here in the city, they will take, if we're going out shopping, they will send, mom will tell my dad to take a different vehicle to go to Princess Auto because he spends that much time in it, and we'll do the rest of the shopping, the family stuff, and meet up with dad later.
Fair enough.
So I'm very well versed with the smell that hits you as you enter a Princess Auto.
So yeah, that'll be happening Thursday night. Should be a heck of a football game. Week 1 is always interesting. Just finished up writing my picks for 3downnation.com, which is always fun in week 1 because really you have no clue what is actually going to happen. None of it really matters at this point. Anything can happen week 1 and has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the rest of the regular season. With that in mind, the Riders do play the Elks on Saturday afternoon now.
Yes.
Which we can talk about, which is a smart move, of course, by the league and TSN to get away from some team called the Edmonton Oilers playing in something called the Stanley Cup Final on Saturday night.
and a huge moneymaker. If you're the Edmonton Elks, you find a way to throw that game on someplace in that stadium and keep the concessions open and make money hand over fist.
So we'll talk a little bit about that game. We'll talk a bit about the Riders' decision to finally move on from Mason Fine, named Shea Patterson their starter. And of course, we'll have to talk about the TSN Top 50 and who's made their way to the top of the list, and one omission of a specific category.
Yes.
Through the entire top 50.
Yes.
Before we get to all that, though, probably also by the time you listen to this podcast, Mr. One John Fraser may be too big for this podcast, as he recorded on Tuesday, I believe it's out on Thursday.
Yes.
The CFL preview episode for our, I guess now friends of the show, the Sickos Committee.
Yeah, really cool. We've always talked about how much they do on social media.
Ironically, I was the one that introduced you to the Sickos Committee to begin with, just when they were sort of starting out as like just a college football sort of community of this, all the weird stuff that happened in the sport. And because us college football fans are like that, we got so into that, they've branched out to basically create their own brand covering all of sports now through different
And fun fact, did you know they had an accredited reporter at the Grey Cup last year?
Mm-hmm. I did see that, yeah. So one of the Sickos was at the Grey Cup. No, it was tons of fun. They are as much fun in podcast form as they are in social media. So I highly suggest you give not just the episode with me, but all the episodes a listen, especially if you're into college football. It was a ton of fun. We were trying to marry different members of the Sickos Committee to different CFL fandoms, which also involve the terms getting to second base in the backseat of various small cars. I believe both Peugeot, Fiat, and of course Toyota all came up. So did you plug En's Toyota on there though?
No, I dropped the ball. I did not. I was just, I said to, and it was funny, like once it settled in, it just felt like, recording with you or with Greg or whomever. But it just, like, I told him, I'm like, I'm nervous. Like, I was very nervous. I respect the work that you guys do. I think you guys are hilarious. You put in a ton of effort and have grown to had this massive following, and now you got the Sickos on ice. So, no, it was cool. So I did plug the podcast. I did plug you. I did plug Dan Plaster as well for your assistance and some of the CFB stuff. But no, it was a great time. Have a listen if you can handle 2 hours straight of Johnisms on a Thursday.
So they can expect Jock, Grammy, maybe Dave. Yeah, so they'll get him a bump about 5 to 7 people probably.
That's right. 7 people in the basement. I know my boy Clayton Croker. I've been on his podcast before. He was pumped. Probably give that a listen. Him and his Sask Sports and Food podcast. So no, I'm definitely not too big for the podcast, but it was weird. I know, right?
Phrasing.
For our podcast, I mean. It was funny, though, actually doing prep for an appearance compared to what I normally do here, which is...
Yeah, so they sent you like a whole thing with like an agenda of what they're talking about and all the topics you need to figure out and all the answers to come up with.
Oh yeah, 100%. And they booked me like 2 months in advance. Meanwhile, here as we're recording on a extra rare morning appearance, I have 2 coffees and I have 5 tabs from 3 Down Nation open for things that we're going to discuss that you just told me about 8 minutes ago. So, no.
Very similar prep for both podcasts. Absolutely.
Identical, really. But I do recommend if for whatever reason you haven't listened to us, you don't follow the Sickos Committee. They are doing more CFL stuff. We somehow got into.
They are just lovers of football. So if you love the sport of football, just follow the Sickos Committee on Twitter and other various social medias because they will discuss
and it's just
more
the
than
highlights you
football.
see, and like it is the best way to dip your toes into college football because you're going to see the most chaotic of the chaotic. They're just all like great people, hilarious people. It was a great chat, and I'm honored. And apparently, June the 4th is just my day to do big things in my career. As it was also the anniversary of the Cornwall winning goal, so I need to start like celebrating June the 4th. I think just make it like a second birthday for yours truly.
Why not?
If I wasn't sick, I probably would have drank a whole bunch last night. So thankfully, I am sick, so I'm here and present and double fisting coffees, Joel.
Yeah, so before we get into all that, of course, as always, we got lots to talk about in this episode. Rider season ahead, the TSN Top 50, and more. But for the Pile of Bones Brewing Company this week, John, what is in the glass this week? Keeping in mind, remember, we are recording this at noon on a Wednesday.
That's fair. I'm not a complete degenerate, all rumors aside. I did think of drinking like a light beer, like a Sleeman's or something this morning, but I can't quite bring myself to it. I am double fisting coffees from my Keurig, little McDonald's this morning. I'm used to having 2 drinks on the go, so it's like habit. It's like muscle memory. Yep. I did last night while recording with the Sickos. I did have the official beer of the podcast, the Pile of Bones White IPA.
I saw the asbestos golf ball made a return too, which
no,
we haven't talked about in a
usually
while.
what I've been doing is I've been mixing the drinks upstairs and bringing them downstairs and trying to stay away from hard liquor. So we'll wait for the next Ask John Anything for the asbestos ball to make its triumphant return. And I was even thinking maybe of bringing it down for the Stadnik this year.
Yes, that would. I think that
would be a brilliant idea. So
it would only be fair to share the asbestos.
A little dash of cancer with your cocktails. Let's go for it.
Never hurts. So just kind of accelerate.
No,
that's
quite
frankly.
Caffeine, constant stress, constant doom, and tons of alcohol. Yes, it is just accelerating the process.
For me, in my mug, I also have a coffee brewed fresh out of my machine.
Your machine's magical.
With local beans from Caliber Coffee. I'm not going to say like we have an espresso machine. Like we splurged on this thing a while ago. It's phenomenal. I can never go back to do anything else. I'm not saying you have to do this, but the beans in your coffee do matter. There are a lot of great local roasters in Saskatchewan where you can find some really cool beans too now. So.
I'm just like thinking my mouth is salivating at your coffee machine. It is that amazing, and you've got it absolutely dialed to. You're like the frickin' Walter White of the espresso machine. It's like the coffees you brew are like crack, and I am looking forward to them at the Stadnik.
Mm-hmm. So probably at the Stadnik, of course, there'll be plenty of discussions about football. And one name that probably won't come up will be one Mason Fine.
Womp.
I assume not by July. I mean, it's possible someone could sign him. He is not the worst backup in the league, as we've discussed. But it was sort of the main discussion coming out of training camp as the Riders had their week of practice after their 2 preseason games was who was going to end up being the quarterback. If you listened to our episode last week, you would hear us. We would have said it should be Shea Patterson. Most of the general public and most pundits and other people agreed that it should be Shea Patterson. And eventually, Corey Mason, Jeremy O'Day agreed that it was Shea Patterson because despite Corey Mason earlier in the week saying there was still lots of competition going on that week, Corey Mace came out and said earlier this week that Shea Patterson ran away with the QB2 job, which, quite frankly, makes a lot of sense if you watch the snaps.
Well, and it makes me feel like we sometimes know what the hell we're doing, that, we are sitting here on this podcast going, he's running away with it, and then to hear the head coach go, yeah, he ran away with it, going, ha, we know what the hell we're doing sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, there's not a ton to say here. We wish Mason Fine well, obviously, in whatever comes next for him. As I said, it would not be surprising to me to see someone maybe take a flyer on him at some point if they run into some QB problems. If injuries hit here in Saskatchewan or somewhere else, I'm sure he will be high on some lists to get a phone call. By all accounts, he's a phenomenal human being and a great guy, but after 4 years and how many games and how many, essentially between all his preseason games and what he saw in the regular season, probably roughly a season's worth of snaps over those 4 years. And we just saw what we saw. And this isn't to say that I think necessarily that, Shea Patterson is the future and that he's this great quarterback himself. He's better than Mason Fine right now. I don't think he's necessarily a long-term answer for this future because he's for this team because he's also 27 and, he has his flaws too. And if they have to rely on him for an entire season, it might get a little dicey at times, but I think he just has that little bit extra sort of in terms of being able to scramble, move around, force the ball downfield, and try to make some plays that Mason Fine, who I think can do it, just for some reason doesn't
everything
want.
You've read about in practice, Fine was able to make those throws. Now I wonder if, kind of like we speculated last week, if with Antonio Pipkin being gone too, if you don't start seeing some package-specific stuff a la Strevler, a la Prukop here for Patterson, because with Fine in the lineup before, you couldn't scratch Fine for Patterson because you weren't sold on Patterson being the guy. And you can't scratch him for Pipkin because Pipkin was so good at short yardage. But with getting rid of both Antonio Pipkin and Mason Fine, you wonder now if you start seeing some mix-it-up stuff. Because let's face it, Trevor Harris is very similar to Zach Collaros, and he's going to take the snap. He's going to get the ball out. He's not going to run. He's going to make great decisions. He's going to make the downfield throws, but Patterson coming in can maybe just mix it up that little bit that you need to do to keep the team off balance like Strevler or Prukop.
Yeah, I think at this point they're pretty confident that Shea Patterson can run the short yardage package if they want him to do that. And I think it just, from sort of a future planning perspective, I don't really, whether Jack Cohn is really third or on the practice roster, I guess maybe doesn't really matter that much in terms of snaps and progress and growth, but I also don't think there was really much to be gained by keeping Pipkin around over him in that third spot. So you may as well just keep Cohn on the main roster, let him develop as he does, and maybe there's still something there because he's still young enough. So I like the thinking of, okay, this guy's a better backup right now, so he'll be our backup, but we're going to, at least for this year, and maybe hopefully it's sort of the thinking going forward, is we're going to want this third spot to be a guy that we hope we can groom into something to one day surpass Shea Patterson and perhaps maybe even
meanwhile, Herb Zukowski out of Montreal is celebrating as Antonio Pipkin was released. That shot came out of left field, but wow. Yeah. It is a great strategy, and it's funny, like in the CFL, especially with quarterbacks, you're just gambling to find a guy that's going to fit at some point.
Right, you just throw Jello against the wall. And
you would look at how long it took for Vernon Adams to turn into something, right? Like he was probably the most touted guy I've seen that's come up here in terms of
other than like the guys that were like huge college stars, like the Johnny Manziels and those sorts of guys. But in terms of the players who were pretty good in college, but you're thinking this guy could probably actually do something here.
Right. And it still took him like 7 years until he became the guy. And even to a degree, he's still the same guy he was at Oregon.
He's still progressing. He's 31 this year, and this is the year we're all expecting him to do big things finally.
After a pretty good year last year. So it's funny how such a crap shot it is. I mean, Drew Brown is just a guy that came out of nowhere, developed in Winnipeg, and now hopefully does good things for the Ottawa Redblacks, as we want to see that organization we so often forget about turn things around. So maybe Cohn becomes the guy. We don't know, because we never really know with CFL quarterbacks being such a crapshoot.
No, you never truly know. The next guy could be on on a negotiation list somewhere who isn't even signed, who played Div 2 somewhere. Like, and
it's funny that way, that the way it doesn't translate, right? Like usually if you get guys at every other position that have had like a taste of Division 1 or a cup of coffee in the NFL or something like that, they come in, you plug them in, usually after a training camp, and then all of a sudden, they're pretty good, right? It's just funny that you can get experienced quarterbacks and guys with tons of clout, former first-round picks, former high draft picks, come to the CFL at quarterback, and it's like a disaster. It's the whole thing is so fascinating to me that there's no rhyme or reason to it. What kind of guy is going to be a good CFL quarterback? They just kind of like appear out of nothingness, like they're sent from heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing really in the NFL to a degree. Like, it's such a jump to go from college to pro, and
right.
Yeah, you never truly know.
But generally now, especially in the NFL these days, more so than the past decade, it's like if you're picking a guy in the first round, he's turning into something, right? I mean, you still
a little more than it used to, but they're getting there.
I mean, you still have guys like Patrick Mahomes that are picked a little later that become, are probably the best quarterback in the league right now. And you still have the Tom Brady, the best ever in that league, being picked in the 6th round. But it's like more consistently you're seeing, if you're picking CJ Stroud, he's going to be good. Bryce Young was on a terrible team but still made good throws. So it's just fascinating to me that there is no equivalent of that in the CFL.
No, but I mean, it's because these guys don't grow up playing the game, and like the field, the extra man, all that sort of thing is different. And until recently, we hadn't really developed any Canadian QBs really at that could really play strongly at a professional level. No offense to some of the guys who came before them who did all right, but I mean, Trey Ford's really the first guy that we can sit here and say, okay, especially out of youth sports, that this is the guy
100%. And he's sitting on the bench because Chris Jones is an idiot.
Yeah. The only other real cut of note, I think, from the Saskatchewan Roughriders coming out of training camp was Braden Linius. But I think what that came down to is the guy's kind of been banged up for a few years. He's been hurt a little bit again this year. and so maybe there was this decision made that, okay, maybe, I don't know this for sure, maybe a 6-game spot was offered, but he didn't want to do it because the player does have to agree to go on there as well. So because of the emergence of Aju and how cheaper he would be, it's just like everyone was like, all right, it seems like this relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you take a combination. I mean, Linnaeus has all the talent in the world. He's probably going to land someplace else when he's healthy and maybe even make an impact there. But he's been too banged up. He comes with too high of a price tag, and there's too many guys. And that's, again, a testament, as we've talked about, to Jeremy O'Day being able to go out and find Canadian guys like Aju, outside of, jokingly making all-name teams in NCAA. Nobody had heard of this guy till the first preseason game where he was solid. Second one, well, that was just a game. So, you're going to pay him the rookie minimum of $60,000. Well, Linnaeus was probably still going to charge you, he was probably still in that 6-figure contract he would have signed out of the NFL. So I think it's great. It shows that O'Day has brought in some guys and that, they're willing to make a tough decision and not keep around a talented guy and, risk letting him go and him going someplace else. But I do find it fascinating that he still hasn't got a sniff like anywhere else. It's not like Marcus Sayles that's like, boom, he's cut. Next thing you know, he's in Saskatchewan. Linnaeus is just not anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, Sayles has a little bit more of a resume at this point. And most rosters are fairly set right now, so it might be a few weeks until teams decide they need to make a change or injuries start to creep in or
fair
that sort of thing. So,
but you think a guy
not unusual,
who just, what was it, 2 years ago he was spent half the season with the Buccaneers, and all of a sudden now he's fun employed. So you'd think that would be scooped up pretty quick. So who knows? Maybe it's injuries. Maybe there's something else there.
Yeah. Well, it was a decision that was made, and I think time will tell if it was the right one at this point. It certainly seems like it was. So the roster is more or less set at this point. It's time to look ahead. Finally, to the 2024 regular season. Corey Mace is, of course, first under the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And sort of the easiest way to do this in terms of where we think the team will go and how well they will do is thanks to gambling now. Lines are easier than ever to find, and pretty much this year, the odds makers have the Rider win total at 7.5. So if you're new to this whole thing, what that means is you place a bet at this point over under that 7.5 point. So if you think they're going to win 8 games or more, you bet the over. You think they're going to win 7 games or fewer, you bet the under. I think it's a fairly fair line.
I would agree. Yep.
For the team.
Have you seen Chuck Norris lately? He's still kicking butt and staying active well into his 80s. What's even more shocking is he looks more jacked than ever and seems to have more energy than guys half his age. And it's all thanks to Morning Kick, a revolutionary new daily drink from Roundhouse Provisions that combines ultra-potent greens like spirulina and kale with probiotics, prebiotics, collagen, and even ashwagandha. Just mix with water, stir, and enjoy. Unlike other green drinks out there, this one tastes exactly like strawberry lemonade and has hundreds of 5-star reviews. Go to roundhouseprovisions.com/save44 for up to 44% off your regular priced order. Plus, every purchase is backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to experience smoother digestion, a boost of energy, and just an overall healthier body, then go to roundhouseprovisions.com/save44 today. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Results can vary.
Why are so many dogs suffering from health issues? Actress Katherine Heigl, who's helped save over 16,000 dogs through her foundation, says she's seeing more issues with dogs' joints, odors, and health than ever before. And after doing a ton of research, she feels there's one place we can look to support any dog's health: their food. So she decided to create something she could actually feel good about feeding her dogs. It's called Superfood Complete. Superfood Complete is made with over 30 of the healthiest ingredients on the planet, including several superfoods vital to your dog's health. Badlands Ranch also sponsors the Jason Debus Heigl Foundation, which has helped rescue thousands of dogs and place them in loving homes. Dogs across America are trying this food and experiencing amazing health benefits. Go to badlandsranch.com/save50 and order right now to get up to 50% off your regular price order with a 90-day money-back guarantee. If you want your dog to experience all these incredible things, go to badlandsranch.com/save50 today.
They should be better than what they've been the last couple of years. I don't think there's any question about that. The question remains is how much better, and does it necessarily always translate to wins, especially early on with a whole new regime? Sometimes it could take time for things to gel, so I do not see, 11, 12, 13 wins in sort of the category for this team this year. So if you're looking at that, if you're looking at 7.5 plus or minus 2 as sort of your range, probably a pretty fair number.
I would agree with that. I'm looking at the odds as well, too. I'm just on playnow.com, which, of course, if you are going to gamble, first off, do it responsibly, and second off, do it and keep your dough here in Saskatchewan. So that's what I'm going to be using for reference, and not just because they're also a massive, massive, massive lacrosse sponsor. So there's a part of that as well, too. So you're actually... Play Now has the line at 7.5, and you're going to get paid less money if you bet that over. So that means that the bookies are anticipating, kind of like us, that that they will have a better season, that they're going to finish at over 7.5 wins. And I mean, last year's team was so freaking bad, minus a couple just out of nowhere performances from guys like Mario Alford and Jake Dolegala in the Labor Day Classic. I mean, did they win? And I know I'm throwing this at you off the top of my head. Did they win a single game that didn't feature a special teams touchdown?
Probably.
Maybe one, but it was because I remember saying it on this here platform, basically saying hey, you can't count. It's great. Mario Alford's the best punt returner in the league. That's bar none. I don't think there's an argument there right now. Which can't count on that because it's such a random thing. You can't count on that to win games, and that seemed to be the only way they were winning games. It was either that or a big pick six or defensive touchdowns. That's what you need to be a great team. But to be a good team, you have to win just games straight up, and I don't think they did that at all last year. Maybe once or twice.
They didn't. But I think they probably still get over that 7.5 mark if Trevor Harris doesn't get hurt.
I absolutely agree. I mean, Mason Fine was not the answer. Jake Dolegala looked good in spurts, but just looking strictly at the skill positions, not even going too deep, you're going to have Trevor Harris back. Yep. Trevor Harris looks healthy. Everything looks great for him. I think the East Division is significantly weaker this year, so you're going to have a chance to...
Yeah. Well, and because they've unbalanced, quote-unquote, the schedule, that tends to lead to more Western crossover because the East has to play the West a lot
exactly, more. Which is going to be advantageous for the Riders. I mean, you even look to start the season, you've got the Elks who may do something. We're not really sure what they are. Back-to-back with the Tiger Cats that, Bo Levi Mitchell ain't Bo Levi Mitchell, and I don't think they'll have that figured out yet. And then the dumpster fire that is the Argos to start your season. You've got a great opportunity here to ring up 3 wins in the first 4 weeks. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to predict, over 7.5 here.
Yeah, so I wrote the piece for 3 Down Nation because I was asked if I had any thoughts on where they were going to go. I thought the over was a pretty smart pick on this one for them. Listening to the 3 Down Nation podcast, Hodge and JC agreed with me on that one as well. So what I did is I just kind of broke down the season. I took all 18 Rider games. Generally, this isn't a hard prediction, and it'll be fun to look back at the end of the year to see what this actually looks like. I thought it'd be a good idea just to go through every week and kind of tally it up and see where I ended up. I ended up with about 10 wins. A few of them I think could flip or flop one way or the other. I don't think there's any question about that. But I certainly think if they went 6-12 over 2 years with really bad teams, 8 wins should be pretty easy to secure. So with that in mind, here we go. I did week 1 at Edmonton.
Agreed.
I think they'll win that game. Week 2 at Hamilton, I put a loss down for that one just because that trip can be tough. Week 3 at home versus Hamilton, win. Week 5 versus Toronto at home, win. Week 6 at BC,
no matter
loss.
how good or bad BC is, that trip's always a loss. Never mind the fact that BC is a certified wagon this year.
Yeah, so they have a bit of a 3 and 4 start, then things get dicey for a little bit here, I think, in my opinion. Home to Winnipeg, I put that down for a loss because it's early in the year, so Zach should still be good.
And if not, Chris Streveler will be fresh enough to just run it down the throats the entire time.
Week 8 at Montreal, that's always a tough one as well.
Especially with
loss.
Montreal looking good and keeping everybody.
Yeah, Week 9 at home versus Edmonton, win. Week 10, this is where I get a little funky. I say Week 10 at Ottawa, loss, just because that one's a fairly quick turnaround. I believe that's like a Saturday to
August
Thursday
the
kind of
3rd
thing.
to August the 8th. Yeah, 5 days.
Yeah, so that one's a bit of a tough turnaround. Week 11 versus Montreal at home, win. Week 12 at Toronto, win. Week 13, Labor Day, of course, win. Week 14,
Naturally.
Banjo Bowl, loss. Week 15 at Calgary. Calgary, they'll probably play them tough at some point, so I think they'll lose in Calgary. Week 17 at home versus Ottawa, win. Week 18 at Edmonton, win. Week 19 at BC versus BC, at home, loss. And Week 21 at home versus Calgary,
so that
win.
means I was not keeping track at all. So you've got them at what, 11 wins there? 10 and 8.
10 and 8.
Yeah.
I went back and forth on a few of them because I was like, at one point I had them, I think, at 11 or at 9. I was like, I think 10 is kind of a safe number. I could see them easily. You know, there's a couple in there, like the last week against Calgary.
Right.
Who knows if it matters or not? So that could easily be a
games
loss.
against Ottawa, we don't really know what Ottawa's going to be.
And if they got Edmonton 3 times, I got them winning them all. Odds are they're going to lose one of them. So, I mean, 8 isn't that out of the question. But given what I think of the CFL East this year, which is Montreal is the only team I really trust, and it's not like they're even truly that great. They're just the most composed right now. I think 8 and 10, and most years in the CFL, 8 and 10 is going to get you in the playoffs. But I think especially this year, 8 and 10 probably gets them into the playoffs. I would think probably solidly 3rd in the East, but
I think with the Elks too, a big factor there. And this sounds ridiculous saying it with the resume that McLeod Bethel Thompson has, is it's going to come down to whether or not Chris Jones removes his head from his ass and plays Trey Ford. Like to me, I think McLeod Bethel Thompson's going to be the starting quarterback for those first 2 games against the Elks, and I think that's going to be the Riders' advantage. I think maybe by that 3rd game they go, oh wow, our best player's sitting on the bench right now, and they play Trey Ford because I mean, McLeod Bethel Thompson after a year off, I'm not sold on him at all. Like if there was a way, and we were discussing this with the Sickos last night, if there was a way to essentially bet against a guy for doing well, I would be all about that on McLeod Bethel Thompson. But of course, as I also pointed out on the podcast last night, I was very against Jason Moss and Danny Machocha, and how the hell did that work out? My team became the vice champions.
Yeah, and so, I mean, 10 sort of where my number is at this year, which I think will get them firmly 3rd in the West if we think it kind of shakes how it does. I would have I think I'm going to have BC 1st in the West this year, Winnipeg 2nd, Saskatchewan 3rd. Then those Alberta teams will fight out for whatever scraps are left, and whoever kind of gets the best quarterback play out of the 2 of them will probably cross over.
And it's actually funny, though, right now, again, looking at Grey Cup odds on Play Now, they've got the Riders as the... I forgot there's 9 teams sometimes. The Riders are the 6th longest shot to win the Grey Cup, ahead of Calgary, Edmonton, and Ottawa. So you bet $1 on the Riders to win the Grey Cup, you win $12 if they win the Grey Cup. Winnipeg's the favorite at $3. BC 5 3/4. Montreal at 6. Toronto at 6.25, which is way too high for Toronto.
Oof.
Hamilton at 8.5 is way too high.
I can understand obviously the sort of what we're going to call the big 3 this year: Winnipeg, BC, and Montreal being ahead of them. Just because they've been so successful, and I think that Toronto defense will still be pretty darn good. They'll keep them in the mix. You could maybe make the argument for Toronto, but definitely not Hamilton ahead of Riders in terms of odds.
And I know it sounds crazy. I would.
I could see Hamilton finishing last.
I see Toronto finishing last in the East. The East is such a mess this year, and it's so nebulous that Ottawa can make the playoffs and win another Grey Cup at 8-9-1 behind Drew Brown. You just don't know, and that's the advantage. And I guess maybe that's what the odds makers are seeing, that you're going to play a lot of games against a lot of shitty teams in the East. And everybody around you is not that good. So you've got a chance to just make it there and catch fire. And we all know the importance of just playing football well at the right time of year leads to championships.
Someone who hasn't necessarily always played his best football at the right time of year is one quarterback, Zach Collaros.
Quite a few times on this podcast and on social media whenever I feel like getting into a fight with strangers on the internet.
Yeah, so of course, ahead of the CFL season, as they always do, the TSN released top 50 players in the league. This is voted upon by a panel of people across the league, mostly media, from across the league, various markets, who vote for different players, and it all kind of gets tabulated at the end, and that's how we end up with the list. And as usual with this list, there's always a lot of controversy, a lot of question marks. Was a guy like Adam Bighill belong on it this year? I don't know. There's a lot of other sort of weird names that make the list, which leads me to believe that there are a number of people who continue to vote for things nationally for this league who are probably still just doing so out of legacy and actually don't follow that closely.
Yes.
And
which I think to a point, not to throw some of our coworkers at 3 Down Nation under the bus, but I remember you telling me a story of showing Zach's playoff numbers to really, really smart guys at 3 Down Nation. I would say that no football better than anybody in this country, and you showing, hey, Zach's kind of dog shit in the playoffs, and them going, oh crap, he is. Like,
yeah, that was ahead of the Grey Cup week when they played Toronto here. Yeah, they're starting to come around. Like, I don't believe anyone at 3 Down Nation who had a vote had Zach Collaros at number one.
So like, are there that many guys voting out of Winnipeg to put him number one?
I don't know. And even then, I mean, even if you're in Winnipeg, I think, for the most part, out of people who I've seen who follow this league and I respect, most of them had Brady Oliveira at number one, which 100%, I think is entirely fair. I don't think there's any question that he was the best player in the league last year, and even with a regression this year, which should be expected to some degree, no offense to him, but I mean, the numbers he put up were stupid last year, so for him to do that to that level again is probably not 100% expected.
I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. And the
Well, I mean, something's bound to happen. He's bound to have an off game or two, maybe get dinged up, miss some games, something like that. Like, you probably can play to the same level. I just don't expect 2,000 yards of offense.
And this is going to sound crazy, and this might be my spiciest take of this entire episode. I think you see it again because now, let's face it, when Winnipeg ran the ball last year, it was let's stop Brady, and teams just couldn't, right? Now you've got that Strevler package back. You're going to see lots of times where Strevler's going to come out, and you're going to have to wonder, okay, who's getting the rock? Is it Brady or is it Strevler, right? You've essentially, in Chris Strevler, added a second legitimate running option and a running threat for Brady Oliveira, right? So you've gone from, okay, Zach's not going to run, to you have Strevler, who I think, if Winnipeg's going to be successful this year, has to play 50% of the snaps in games, which is why it's absurd to me that Zach's the number one player on the list.
Yeah, and I mean, when I talk regression, I mean, maybe he gets only like 1,800
right, no,
instead of 2,000 or something like that, right? So, like, yeah, I think he still should be. I picked him in the 3 Down Nation. We had our predictions for the year in terms of Grey Cup and various awards. I think I had VA as my MOP, but I could easily see him seeing MOP, and he should be hands down easily the most outstanding Canadian again. I basically just picked VA as MOP just because it ends up being a quarterback anyway of a team who's pretty good. It's kind of
the sexy thing to do.
I don't necessarily agree that's how it should always be and that's how it should go, but that's kind of how the voting goes, so that's kind of how I lean to why I picked that way. But I would have had Brady Oliveira potentially as my MOP last year as well.
Well, and I think too, because...
So I think hands down, he's easily the best player in the league. And yeah, we've seen the numbers from Zach Collaros every year in the playoffs. This is not, and... To be clear, when we're talking about these not number one, I'm not saying that he should be like number 35 on the list or something. The guy's easily top 10, probably top 5, maybe number 3. Like, you could make the argument to me as high as number 3. I know some people had him even lower on the list than out of the top 5, but sort of within that range is fine. Like, the guy, there's maybe only one other quarterback in the league who is actually better than him, and that's Vernon Adams. And you could still talk me into telling me that Zach Collaros is better, and I could understand where you're coming from. But all we're ever saying about this guy is there's this weird cult around him that people think that he is this, like, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, sorry, bad example because he's a garbage human being example, but, that sort of level of quarterback when he's just, he's good. He's maybe the best of his generation, but that speaks more to his generation than his
He's a very good
talents.
quarterback, and it's funny. It's like whenever we make these points, or oh no, he's really good. No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but to use Tom Brady as an example, Tom Brady didn't disappear. You didn't have like games last year where Drew Brown was coming off the bench because Zach was that bad and winning games. You didn't have that with Tom Brady. You knew what you were getting with even Tom Brady's worst games weren't so bad that you were thinking about pulling a guy off the field. And he's basically looked at as the Tom Brady right now. And Tom Brady balled out in the playoffs, right? Is he still the best quarterback in the CFL right now? Again, to me, it's VA. I am very much, and I'm not just saying this to keep with a shtick. I'm not, pulling a Rod Peterson here and just making this my thing. I honestly believe that VA can do more with less around him. I think Collaros is a product of a very, very good team, a well-managed team with great weapons. And I'll go back to this, that if you're the Winnipeg organization, you're not spending real money to bring back Chris Streveler if you don't think your offense is stagnant. You're not bringing back Chris Streveler for, giggles and laughs and cuddles and community appearances. You're not spending $150,000 to bring that guy back when you're already spending $600,000 on your quarterback. You obviously are going, okay, to me, that's the signal that Winnipeg's going, we know he's not the guy and we need tons of support around him, right? Again, to use Tom Brady as an example, Tom Brady never had a guy like, Dalton Schoen, the number 4 pick. He never had.
There was the Randy Moss era.
Oh my God, that was so much.
Which he put up like 50 touchdowns.
And even at that, he never had a
running
running back. Like Zach is the representation. Zach is a very good quarterback who's the representation of a very good team around him. And when it comes down to it in the postseason, or comes down to it even like Labor Day, that the teams go, okay, we're going to take Brady away, we're going to take Lawler away, we're going to take Dalton away. Can you beat us? And there's been times where he can't when it matters the most. And to me, I think you have to factor in playoffs to this. So,
I mean, how many times has he only put up about 50 in a playoff
We went
game?
through it, yeah, exactly.
Pretty much all
again,
of them.
Hasn't thrown a touchdown pass for 3 playoff games, and 2 of those games being Grey Cup games, right? So, to me, Brady Oliveira is my number 1 because he can do so much. I think VA is my number 2.
Yep.
And I think, I mean, again, this is funny that people think we're anti-Zach, but Zach's still my number 3 guy. I'm not putting Dalton I'm not putting Dalton Schoen ahead of Zach Collaros. I'm not putting Cody Fajardo. I'm not putting Chad Kelly ahead of Zach Collaros.
I mean, there's an argument to be made whether Cody Fajardo should even be on the list.
I mean, let's face it. Cody's on the list because of what? Fuck! I even had the quote last night on the Sickos. What was it? His pregame speech. What was his line?
Oh,
yes. The fuck you, just watch. Yes, it feels like that put Cody on the list single-handedly, right?
I mean, it's a Grey Cup bump. The guy had a hell of a game. He had the best game of his career and the most important game of his career. Kudos to him. He worked with what he's got, and we've never been Cody Fajardo haters. He is what he is. He's a good starting quarterback,
exactly.
But not
and now he's on the list. Now, the stupid thing with the list, and you said it, that I think we've got a lot of media people that select this list that are just making legacy picks. And this isn't just because of my ongoing, my bro crush growing and Sergio Castillo, as now Winnipeg's like, oh my God, this guy's got a ton of personality. Let's use him in everything. But how the hell do you not have a kicker on this list? How do you not have Sean White on this list?
Mm-hmm.
Like I get it. Like, oh, jokes aside.
Or a Cody Grace, who's like, easily the best puncher in the league.
And again, like, all jokes aside of, John's just doing this because of Sergio. Like, and again, should Sergio Castillo be on this list? I think so, yes. Should Sean?
Maybe. I mean, you could make the argument. He wasn't the best place kicker in the league last year, so I could certainly see him being off it, but historically he could have been on it, and there certainly should be at least a place kicker and probably a puncher on this list somewhere.
I think, like, Sean White should be on this list. Like, how is Sean White not on this list? The guy is, like, one of the best kickers to ever play the game.
And he likes curling.
And I lost money to him in poker once, during the pandemic. And, I just, it goes to show the fault in the list that, maybe they're not asking the right people. And maybe guys are just going, I'll just kind of go in this order, right? The list does its job. It gets us talking about the CFL and the players and podcasters 100%. Like us saying that it's bullshit that Sergio Castillo and Sean White aren't on there, and having a discussion about, Zach Collaros being bad in the playoffs. So it's doing its job. One I like being on there. I was surprised he was this low. Was I like seeing Sean Bain on there. I was impressed. I'm like, okay, there's a guy that, isn't super well known. Like he's not your Hardrick, he's not your Trevor Harris, the easy riders to vote for. Ouellette, obviously. It was like, oh, somebody out there's paying attention to put Sean Bain on this list.
Yeah, and I think, after the first little bit, you're kind of getting into weird situations where a lot of guys are probably getting on this list just because there isn't a ton of voters, and it really starts to get spread out, and then that's when you get some of these funky names.
That's fair, but I legitimately believe that Sean Bain is one of the best. Him and Anthony Lanier, who come in at 49 and 50. I honest to God believe that they are among the best players in the CFL, which is why, again, the Riders should do much better this year.